my friends, and welcome to episode 125 of the Kiss Army Nation podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Pasquale Veri.
And I am Claudio Spera. Welcome to the show, everyone.
At the risk of sounding like a fanboy, during her performance in Ottawa, Lee Aaron introduced her band, and when she said Sean Kelly, I said, oh my God, I know that name. Yeah, he wrote that book, Don't Call It Hair Metal. This book right over here. And I thought we have to have Sean on the show, and we are so happy to have him here tonight. Now, besides Lee Aaron, Sean has played with Nelly Furtado, founded the glam rock band Crash Kelly, was a member of Helix as the bassist, and he has collaborated with Rough Trade and continues to tour with Coney Hatch. So on this episode, we're going to talk all things 80s. Kiss Army Nation, please welcome Sean Kelly.
Hey, boys, thanks for having me on.
Hey, lovely to have you, man. It's such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Pleasure's all mine.
So the last time we talked, you were off playing with Coney Hatch, and you just returned from that tour. How did it go?
It was great. I guess, yeah, I was just on our way to, we were just on our way to Germany for the Indoor Summer Festival, and it was amazing. I love going over to Europe. I actually played that same festival with Lee Aaron a year ago. So it was deja vu playing at the famous Markthal in Hamburg. And yeah, we had a wonderful time. Coney has a lot of dedicated fans there, as does Lee. And Europe's been very, very good to all the acts I've played with, and very good to me. So it's always such a pleasure to go over there and play.
Well, you were so excited when you messaged me, and you're equally excited about the release of Postcard from Germany, the live album.
Yeah, the new Coney live album. We recorded that in 2018 at another festival in Germany, the Heat Festival in Ludwigsburg. And it was so great. It was one of those magical nights, where the crowd was right there with us. It was a great performance. And the show has been mixed beautifully by our good friend, Vic Florencia. So very proud of it, and very proud of the fact that it contains two new Coney Hatch studio tracks. The first two tracks I got to work on with the boys. I've been a longtime fan, and at 10 years in, I'm the new guy. But it was amazing to work in the studio and work on those new tracks and to have that live document. That's actually coming out. Very, very proud to say, on Anthem Records in Canada here. Nice. On September 22nd, and it came out through Explore One, Cleopatra, the rest of the world.
Okay. No, looking forward to that one. Can't wait.
Right on.
Super cool. I'm so excited with this episode. It's going to be amazing. I can't wait to bombard you with the questions, and get you into the 80s eras and Kiss and all the stuff,
Yeah, man.
Wait. There you go.
Hit me, man.
Sean, Pasquale's introduction of you only scratched just the surface of all your accomplishments. So having accomplished so much, it's only fitting to start at the beginning. So, I think I want you to share with us, what were some of your musical influences?
Well, my life, is kind of, I can divide my youth into chunks. My first memory of really connecting with something was with superheroes. And from superheroes, I went to hockey. And then from hockey, I went to Twisted Sister, and I stopped there. Once I heard Twisted Sister, that was what really connected with me. There were times where music connected with me earlier, but it was more of a song. Like, for example, the song Gloria by Laura Branigan. I talk about that in the book. That song resonated with me in a very big way. I Love Rock and Roll by Joan Jett. That song resonated with me. Mm-hmm. But when I started to get into hard rock and heavy metal, that's when music became all encompassing to me. And really the zeitgeist moment was when I heard We're Not Gonna Take It. I had been becoming aware of bands like Quiet Riot and Def Leppard, and music had become more important. But when I saw the video for We're Not Gonna Take It, and I heard Dee's voice and the sound of those guitars, that's what set me off on the course I'm continuing on to this day as a 50-year-old man,
Yeah. And, Pask, he also mentioned in the introduction, that you founded Crash Kelly. So,
yes.
And can you talk about that? And what's the meaning of that name? What's the significance of that name?
Sure. Well, Crash Kelly was a band that I formed after I'd already had my first forays with record deals and touring in the music industry. You know, I saw how quickly things can go well and how quickly things can go away, you know, how quickly you can get signed and how quick you can get dropped. And I experienced that. And, you know, I was kind of struggling along and, you know, I'd put out a couple of records and I said, you know, I got to find a way. I got to pay the rent here. I'm living in Toronto. You know, it's hard to make a living as a musician. So I ended up going to teachers college. And I said, you know, I'll go to teachers college and I'll supply teach. And then maybe I can, you know, eke out a living and, you know, pay the bills while I'm trying to make it. But a very interesting thing happened. When I went to teachers college, I discovered I love teaching. I loved it. And when I came back, I ended up taking a job teaching music with the Toronto Catholic District School Board. And I loved it. And what that did was it liberated me, because all of a sudden I didn't have to try and be something I wasn't. You know, when I moved to Toronto in 1991, my hair was out to here. I was a big fan of all the 80s hard rock that come before. And as we know, a little band named Nirvana came along and kind of changed a lot of things. Mm-hmm. And the 90s for me were a period of searching. I actually loved a lot of the music in the 90s, but it wasn't my necessarily authentic musical self. The way I played guitar changed. The types of instruments changed. I was trying to fit in with something. And when I went to teachers college, came back, got a job, I was free. I said, you know what? I'm going to do whatever the hell I want to do. I don't have to worry about anything. And that's where Crash Kelly came from. Crash Kelly was me writing. I wrote a record called Penny Pills. And that record, I wanted to have a record that I could grab on my record shelf that I couldn't find before. One that kind of mixed early 80s Sunset Strip hard rock with 70s glam. Everything from early Motley Crue, Hanoi Rocks, Thin Lizzy, Mott the Hoople, T-Rex, you know, all these kind of things. Everything I loved. Yeah. And I didn't have any ambitions. But what happened was when I did that, that's when things started to connect. And all of a sudden, this little record, I'd been playing in a band with Dale Martindale from Images in Vogue called 69 Duster. We'd worked with an independent company called RCD Music. Chris, the president, heard my solo stuff and said, oh, you know, we should put that out. And we ended up licensing it with a label in the UK, got a tour with the London Choir Boys, went over there and toured. And then from there generated enough interest that Century Media Records had a rock imprint called Liquor and Poker Music. They signed us to an American deal. And we ended up, you know, having our records come out in the States, signed a Japanese deal. Record came out in Japan. We toured North America with Alice Cooper. You know, toured Canada with Gilby Clarke. Had an incredible experience. Made our record with Gilby Clarke in LA. Oh, wow. And so Crash Kelly was a labor of love. And while it certainly didn't make much of a commercial impact, it was very satisfying to have done something exactly the way I wanted to do it on my own terms. A great experience learning how to front a band, be the band leader, principal songwriter, producer. So I am very grateful for that experience. And yeah, that's the story. And the name was the name. My uncle was a professional hockey player, played in the American Hockey League, and so was my father and many members of my family. And his nickname was Orville. His name was Orville, but his nickname was Crash. And that'll tell you all you need to know about his style of hockey play.
Right.
And, yeah. I love it. But he was a very colorful character and somebody I love very much. And I really used it as a tribute to him. He was such a sweet guy, but on the ice, you know, he'd bust your nose if you looked at him wrong. Like, he was this real dichotomous kind of fellow.
He transformed, you know, in different.
Yeah. And I thought he was a pretty good amalgam of the human condition. So that was what that record was, me kind of expressing all these things I was going through.
That's a great name, by the way. I'm telling you, man, that's a great name. It's really catchy. Yeah. And you know, from what you're saying, Jean, it sounds to me like you said that maybe commercially didn't do you know, that great, but from the personal point of view, it looks to me that it was like an inflection point for you, right? So it's like
It was, Claudio, and that's a great way to look at it. It really was this thing where the art was the most important thing. It wasn't about the deal. It was about the music. I was making the music I always wanted to make, challenging myself, and then also seeing that people were connecting with it. And people I respected, you know,
right.
When a guy like Alice Cooper says, "Hey, why don't you guys come out and do a few more weeks with us?" Like, I mean, that was something I couldn't even fathom. Somebody like Gilby Clarke, who I admired so much, agreeing to produce a record. And I ended up joining Gilby's band for a while. Like, I mean, you know, that was somebody who really, Gilby Clarke saved rock and roll for me, I think. And when he put out Pawn Shop Guitars in the middle of the grunge era, I was like, okay, there's hope.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. You know, it's interesting when sometimes, you know, when you're in the music business, of course, you have the tendency of follow some trends or try to get on the wagon. But when you do things that come from your heart, you know, like when you really feel it, it makes a difference, man. It makes a big difference.
It makes a huge difference. And I'm grateful for the acts I played. I played with some great acts in the 90s, and it allowed me to become a more diverse player. I discovered that I had a skill set where I could go into and be a session musician on people's records, which is something I continue to do to this day. So there was a lot of good things that came of it, but certainly from an artistic standpoint, when I stopped second guessing and I just did what was in my heart, that seemed to garner the most success and help me forge an identity. And even, you know, going on to play with Nelly Furtado. I mean, I remember they asked me, they said, "Well, are you going to cut your hair?" And I was like, "No, no, I'm a 36-year-old man. This is what you get. You know, you're going to get the guy with the leather jacket and the Marshall." And that was, you know, that fortunately that worked for a while.
I love what you said about 90s music. You didn't feel that it was the authentic you. We recently did an episode on Carnival of Souls where Kiss tried to be grunge, and it didn't work because it wasn't authentic. It wasn't what Kiss was about. It wasn't the message that they tried to convey. Is that when music stopped for you, in a sense, when grunge came about?
Well, no, you know, it's more layered than that, because I really enjoyed a lot of that. And for a while, there was this transition period, like, really there were bands that were still continuing to have success, right? Like, I mean, you know, Guns N' Roses were at their absolute apex in 1991, 92, 93 even. You had bands like Jane's Addiction, bands like Saigon Kick, that I didn't know. Alice in Chains to me felt transitionary. Like, I didn't feel like they weren't my music, you know, but I did notice that certain ways I played the guitar, certain things I did, or certain types of instruments weren't necessarily gelling with this new alternative mindset. And I did notice, I'll never forget, I was so excited when Skid Row's Subhuman Race came out. I was such a massive fan. And I remember living in Vancouver at the time, and I told my agent at the time, "I'm so excited for this record." She goes, "Don't ever tell anybody that. There couldn't be anything less cool than that band." And I went, "What?" And then, you know, sure enough, it was, you were starting to see a kickback against the bands from the 80s. So music didn't stop for me. And in fact, when I go back and listen now, I listen to bands like Stone Temple Pilots, and I go, you know, there's a lot of great rock and roll in there.
Absolutely.
It was just moving back into more of a 70s thing. It was, I think, a necessary reaction to the formulaic nature of what was happening with some of the commercial hard rock of the late 80s. Like, you know, there was a time when every band seemed to have a W in their name, you know, White Lion, Wingo, Warren, you know, there was a time when they all had the same clothing designers. They had the same video directors, the same producers, the same session people playing on their records. Like, it did start to get into a formulaic thing, even though I loved a lot of that formulaic stuff.
Mm-hmm. I was listening to an episode of Classic Guitar Rock Podcast, and they asked the question, how do you define classic music, classic rock? How would you define it?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, for me, I think it all depends on how old you are, right? For me, classic rock was always the music of the 60s and 70s. Right. And then you saw the 80s start to be absorbed in that. And now you're seeing the 90s absorbed into that. If you listen to stations that used to predominantly play 60s and 70s music, they've now encompassed the 80s and 90s as well. And you're going to see it with the early 2000s, because what happens is at some point, the average music listener wants to go back to a simpler time, and they listen to music that brings them back, brings them a sense of nostalgia.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And it's not a dirty word.
Yeah,
it just is what it is. But truly classic music, I tend to go back to the golden age of the 70s and 80s for me, because to me, that was when I think most of our idea, even when you listen to newer bands like Rival Sons or, Maneskin, when they're referencing those bands, they tend to go back to those classic guitar tones, your AC/DC, your Aerosmith, your Led Zeppelin, your Van Halen, it's kind of got
even the Sheepdogs, those guys, they sound like that,
man, like and they're looking at like the Allman Brothers and the Guess Who, you know what I mean? So it's got that. There is something that happened there in the 70s and 80s. I think the 50s were kind of rock and roll prototypes. The 60s, you're developing and experimenting, and in the 70s, you kind of develop the drums, the electric guitar tones, the vocals that become the essence of what we know as classic rock.
Oh, very nice, very nice. Okay, let's take a little bit of a left turn here. You mentioned Nelly Furtado. So, what was it like working with her? And you also worked with Helix, working with them. What was that like?
Well, you know what? I'll start with Helix because it leads into the Nelly Furtado thing, if that's okay. So,
yeah, of course.
The first concert I ever saw was Helix and Honeymoon Suite at the North Bay Memorial Gardens in 1985. And I have to tell you, it was life-changing because I was already a diehard hard rock fan at that point, right? But then I started realizing, wait, these guys are from Niagara Falls and Kitchener? Yeah. Well, I've been to both those places. I was like, I know where that is. This isn't New York. This isn't LA. This isn't London, England. These are places that I played hockey in. Like, I know where this is. And that means maybe there's a chance that me in North Bay, I can do that too. And I remember like riding my bike to go to the Shoppers Drug Mart for my mom. And the buses were behind the arena and waiting. And then, the only thing that was missing was the smoke billowing out of the doors as it opened up. And out comes Brian Ballmer in full leather.
Like a movie, right?
Totally. And I'm like on my bike and whoa. And, to have those guys come out and not only be cool, but like, hey man, come on in and show me. And I'm watching the guitar tech, like change the guitar strings, and I'm watching the stage be set up. And I was just like, oh my God, like this is a behind the scenes look. And I've had the opportunity to make records with both those bands and perform with both those bands. Like, to me, I can't even figure out how that all happened, I mean, with Helix, I can't. I bugged Brian Ballmer for about 5 years to be in his band. I think he just got sick of me after a while. Actually, it was a friend of mine from Montreal, Mitch Lafont, who
Mitch.
Put in.
Oh yeah, Mitch, of course. Yeah.
Mitch put in the good word for me and has been a great supporter. And he I think that helped wear Ballmer down. And eventually I got to be in Helix. So being in Helix was a dream gig. When I auditioned, I just kept looking around and I go, that's Brent Turner. Like, that's Brian Ballmer. And I'm playing Rock You right now with Helix. It was unbelievable. And then to get the gig and it's so funny. I'll never forget, because Brian, first thing he said to me after he gave me the band agreement and everything, just so you know, you won't be playing on any records and you won't be writing any songs. I've got a writing partner, and that's so. Of course, the first thing that went through my mind was, I can't wait to write songs and play on some Helix records. And the first opportunity I got, I was playing my songs in front of him, and one caught his ear one day. And honestly, it's one of the most cherished writing partnerships I've ever had. He's such a great songwriter, and we made some great records together. Vagabond Bones, Bastard of the Blues, Skin in the Game EP. We've written some really great songs together, songs that I'm very proud of. And it was amazing. So I'm in Helix, life's good. I'm living my dream as far as I'm concerned. And then I get a call from my old guitar tech, who's now working with Nelly Furtado. And he knows that I play classical guitar, because I'd released some classical guitar albums that had done quite well. and she was touring a Spanish album, and she needed somebody who could play nylon string guitar. So my guitar tech friend knew this, and he said, "Hey man, you should come to." I said, "Oh, I can't play that gig. I don't know those songs. I don't play that style." He said, "Oh man, it's a pretty good gig, you know." Like, and I knew she was a big star, but I didn't know any of her music. I aside from the hits, right? But I recognized that it was an opportunity, so I went down and I auditioned for the music director, and he said, "Okay, yeah, okay." And he heard me play some classical guitar, and I rehearsed for the band, and eventually she came in, and you know, the audition process went well, and I was offered the gig. But that meant I had to leave Helix, and that was very tough, you know, very tough for me. But Brian was very supportive. He understood this was an opportunity, and you know what, playing with Nelly was an absolutely mind-blowing experience on a professional level. I did things I couldn't have ever fathomed, from playing the Tonight Show twice to, you know, playing in stadiums and arenas around the world, from Japan to, you know, Chile, like all, you know.
Oh, yeah, huge exposure.
Yeah,
you know, huge.
massive exposure. And she's such a great musician, and the opportunity to record with her and to work with world-class musicians of different genres, to go down to South America and play with artists like Juanes, you know, like you're just constantly learning. And I was learning about hip hop. I was learning about, you know, how the pop world works and production. And it was
so enriching, right? So
enriching.
Yeah.
And I made some of my best musical friends during that experience. So
Beautiful.
both those experiences were incredible.
And my God, you got to work with one of my favorite artists, Lee Aaron. And, you know, I followed Lee back in the 80s, and I love how musically she's matured, you know, and you see that in her lyrics, especially with a few of her latest albums. And, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I could picture, you know, Lee Aaron on stage rocking and everybody's going crazy. And then she goes off stage and tucks her kids to bed, you know, playing mommy. Am I right?
Well, you know what? She is an amazing mom and a family person at heart, and she is a real inspiration for somebody who has prioritized in her life, but still has an incredible artistic impetus. So she's still a creative, world-class performer, keeps her chops up. You know, she's constantly working on her production chops, on writing new songs. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, I mean, she's a wonderful human being, first and foremost, and someone I consider a sister and a dear friend, and someone I learned a lot with as a songwriter too. Like, we write together. We've written some great records together too, along with Dave Reimer, her very talented bass player, John Cody, or her drummer, and her husband. I mean, it's a real band situation. She's definitely the captain of the ship, but it is definitely a band, and she makes us feel like that, you know. Like, she's even invited us along. She's getting inducted into Canada's Walk of Fame, and she wanted us there, you know. She wanted us up there with her, and like, what an honor, right? Like, I mean, she's honored, but she turns around and honors us like that. Like, that's absolutely incredible, and says a lot about who she is. She really goes out of her way to value our contributions to her vision, you know.
Oh, but that's fantastic. She's including you guys in the Hall of Fame. I mean, even on stage, you can tell it's not the Lee Aaron show. It's the entire band, and it makes the experience so much better for us.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm glad you said that. And, you know, she really believes that, and that speaks to her security in herself as an artist, right? Like, I mean, she wants to share. She's constantly bigging up all of our individual accomplishments, and you know, she doesn't have to do that. You know, like, I'd be perfectly happy if she never said anything, just to get a chance with it. But that's just who she is, and it's a family at this point. Like, it really is family. So
how did that happen? How did you get to work with her?
Well, that was a result of me writing my first book. My first book was a book called Metal on Ice, that Tales from Canada's Hard Rock and Heavy Metal Heroes, that came out in Dunder Press 10 years ago in 2013. So at the time, I was working up at a company called Coalition Music in Toronto as an artist mentor, as an artist coach, and as a music director for some artists up there. And so we were at a board meeting at Coalition, and they knew I was writing this book. So they said, "Hey, you know, we should do a concert and do an album. Like at that point, Coalition had a deal with Warner Music, so why don't we do an album and we'll get some of the artists that you interviewed for the book and we'll record something. So one of the artists I interviewed was Lee Aaron. But I was and I remember at this point, Lee had kind of taken a step back from the rock world. She'd been working in the jazz ADM and was just kind of getting back into playing rock, really. So I said, well, she would. First of all, I said, I wonder if I could even interview her. Like, can you even talk to her? She's like a superstar. In my mind, she was but I reached out and she did agree to be interviewed, and we had a great chat, and she liked the book. And then she was open to this idea of recording. We did a re-recorded version of Metal Queen for the Metal on Ice album. And that, so I went to Vancouver and we recorded the tracks here in Toronto, but I went to Vancouver to work with her on her vocal. And in the studio, I was so intimidated, right? Like I was like, what am I going to tell Lee Aaron to sing? You know what I mean? Okay, what can I possibly tell her? So, but she was great. We just kind of gelled on a personal level and a creative level. And she said, and I said, I know you got a band, but if you ever need a guitar player to sub in, I'd be honored. She goes, oh, my guitar player actually can't make 3 shows in Ontario. I went, yes, wow. Please. From the minute we got into a rehearsal room, the magic was there. We went, oh, we're a band.
That's right.
This is a band. And
this
is a band.
Yeah.
And we haven't looked back, you know.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's been great. And first gig was in Ottawa. I remember it was actually in Ottawa at the Brass Monkey.
Oh, the Brass Monkey, right.
Yeah. So it's been great. In 2014 or 2024 will have been 10 years I've been playing with her.
Wow. No, like I said, I saw that show in Ottawa on Canada Day, and yes, Lee Aaron's on stage, but for myself, I'm not just looking at Lee. I'm looking at you. I'm looking at the drummer. Looking, the bass. You guys all have a sort of a different sort of energy on stage, and you sort of all bring that together in one show. It's incredible to see. It really is.
Well, thanks, Pascal. I appreciate that, and I'll pass that on to the band because I think that it is like that's that intangible chemistry, right?
Yeah,
just something that happens. But we have a deep respect for each other and everyone's skill sets, and we're working on a new record right now. And it's so funny. I was just talking to her a couple of days ago, and the fires are still there. We're getting excited about the record, and I'm texting Dave and John, hey, what about this? What about this?
Yeah,
so it's fun.
Yeah, that was my next question, because as you said, she took a break from the rock scene, and she did it to raise her family, right?
Yeah, I think she was exploring jazz, because she's a very, very talented jazz singer and an authentic jazz singer. So she was exploring that, and yes, and I think she did take some time off. I think there was a concerted effort to focus on raising a family and do that. She's done an amazing job of that. She has 2 beautiful kids.
Yeah, and then when she came back in the rock scene, I mean, one album after another, and they are amazing. They really are. I'm not just saying that. Because again, there's a maturity in the music, in the lyrics of her songs. Fantastic stuff. So, what can you tell us about the new album?
Elevate, the latest, or
no, the one that's coming out.
Well, I can't tell you too much, but because there's a little bit of an element of surprise. But nice. I'll tell you, Lee Aaron fans are going to love it, and that's coming from a Lee Aaron fan.
No doubt.
We're having lots of fun with it, and she'll be making an announcement fairly soon, I think, about it. But I'll leave that to her. But let's just say I'm having the time of my life.
Oh wow! Can't wait.
I know she is too. Yeah. It's gonna be fun.
Nice.
Love it to hear. That's awesome. Jean, obviously, as you know, our show focuses on Kiss.
Sure.
So we would love to touch on them for a minute, and with you here. So we know you're a huge Kiss fan, and what was your first exposure to the band, to Kiss?
My first exposure was in the 70s. My sister, I have a sister who's 13 years older than me, and she had a boyfriend. I remember he had a Kiss record. He brought it over, and I was just like, at this point, I don't even know the music. I was just like, what is this? But I don't know. It's kind of scary, but I think I like it. And I remember it was Peter Criss that I was just fascinated with, the cat man. I was like, wow, is that guy, was he a cat? Like, is he part cat? Like, I couldn't figure out what was really happening. But so that was my first exposure, was that they were just this kind of otherworldly phenomena. But musically, it's 80s Kiss that I first connected with in a big way. And I came back to reconnect with 70s Kiss, but it really was my first honest, to goodness connection with Kiss was actually probably the Animalize album, was Heaven's on Fire. When I heard Heaven's on Fire, I still think that that's a near perfect pop song.
Okay, but you already knew that these guys, they wore makeup in the past or something, or not even?
I did, because, but really from just reading Hit Parader and Circus Magazine. And to me, it was funny, in the 80s, Kiss were like elder statesmen. I knew that. Like I said, these guys look a little older than Rat and Motley Crue. Like it was a little bit, had a little bit more of an antique thing about it, but undeniable songs. Every album had 2 to 3 absolute undeniable smashes on them. And I liked that. I liked that I couldn't articulate what it was at the time, but now I realize it was maturity. It was songcraft. And Paul was really captaining the band at that point. And also, I have to tell you, one of the great unsung guitarists in rock and roll for me is Bruce Kulick. And Bruce is like, I write about him in the book. I call them the in and out innate guitar players, guys like Sam Bohr and Matthias Jabs and Kulick, who just were crafting these unbelievably hooky guitar solos that had melody and flash and aggression and technique, all kind of into this digestible format that you would hear on the radio and be in and out in 8 bars, right? So I loved 80s Kiss, and I supported them all the way through. I loved Asylum, I loved I really loved, I know this is later.
Crazy Nights? How about Crazy Nights?
You know what? I liked Crazy Nights. I loved the guitar playing. I thought it was a great showcase for Bruce, but it almost got a little too soft with the keyboards for me. Too keyboard, and that's really more of a mixed thing. But the song Crazy Nights, where I really connected with that was years later in England. I was touring with Crash Kelly, and I heard it in a club, and the club erupted when that came on. And I went, oh, okay. This was probably a bigger anthem in Europe and in England than it was in the States or Canada even, But really it was when Revenge came out. That's what I thought. I still think Revenge is one of the best Kiss albums. It's Bruce's guitar tone, Ezrin coming back into the picture. It just seemed like that was my buddy Martin Popoff always says, try harder records. That was a try harder record. Yeah, we got to get back on track. But I like Hot in the Shade. Like I loved all the 80s Kiss stuff. There was always one track that I would listen to over and over again. I even liked the bonus tracks on the Smashes, Thrashes, and Hits. Like I thought, like, even though they're aping Robert Palmer, I thought, it was a good job. They were good. They were good at that, Like I remember Tears Are Falling. Paul was listening. He was watching MTV and Would I Lie to You came on by the Eurythmics. And he went, that's a cool groove.
Right.
Oh no, tears. Like
true. Yeah.
But that's what songwriting is. Yeah. It's clever theft.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Really? We're all pushing around 12 notes. Like we're gonna run into the same words.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, absolutely. We let me tell you, I know past, and we've done many episodes. With time, it's been like almost 3 years, right? 4 years now.
Yeah.
But, I can say that we're having a blast here with you, Jean. That's what I can tell you, man. On this episode, man, the way you approach things and themes and how you explain, it shows your teacher side. You know what I mean? So it's amazing, man. It flows right away. It's fantastic.
Well, thank you. And let me return the compliment. Like these things are so much easier when you're with engaged hosts and people who have share a passion. And that's very clear. And you guys are both very articulate. So I'm having a great time too.
Oh,
so
thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So you touched on 80s Kiss, and of course we will get back to that theme because that's your thing with Kiss. But with 50 years in the music business for a band like Kiss, with different lineups and different kind of music styles, how do you think Kiss fit in as a band, let's say, for instance, during the 70s?
Well, I came to know Kiss in the 80s, but I think I really fell deeply in love after seeing the 96 reunion tour. Because at that point, remember, as things were changing in the 90s, a lot of these grunge bands were referencing Kiss. That was like Pearl Jam and Nirvana and Soundgarden. Like they were all Kiss fans, just like the later 80s guys like Skid Row were. So I was constantly hearing about Ace Frehley, Ace Frehley, Ace Frehley. And really, I knew Ace Frehley from Frehley's Comet, right? Like, I mean, like that was where I first kind of became aware of Ace's guitar playing. But when I went to go see him, I started reinvestigating the older catalog. Well, then it was undeniable. I was like, oh, okay, this is magic. This is special. So in terms of where they fit in the 70s, I think that they were unjustly maligned because the show was so visually striking in their image. I don't think they got enough credit as musicians. Like, I mean, Ace's guitar playing is so memorable and was so beautifully executed on those early studio records. Like those are immaculate guitar solos. They're perfectly composed. Paul's rhythm playing, he sounds like, he's coming out of Eric Carmen and the Raspberries and Pete Townsend. Gene was a Paul McCartney disciple.
Yeah,
really. And Motown, great lines. Peter didn't he study with
Gene Krupa?
Gene Krupa. And he swings hard. There was a beautiful collective feel, great songs, really good tight vocal harmonies. And from everything I've heard live, even with all the bombast going on around them, oftentimes, and especially in the early days when they weren't contending with massive stages and stuff, they were a super tight band. If you watch Midnight Special and the live things they did, they were great. Yeah. So I don't think, were they the Allman Brothers? No. Were they trying to be? No. Like, I mean, I think that they deserve more respect for their musicianship and songwriting. But obviously, at the end of the day, in terms of influence, you can't deny what they've done for concert spectacles in general. Like, I mean, you're watching Taylor Swift, you're ultimately watching Kiss. Like, I mean, that was Kiss who brought that all.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah. Could you put Kiss as part of a classic rock band?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. I have no problem saying that. I think the best of their canon stands up with the best of any of those bands in the 70s. Not everybody agrees with me though. It's funny when I talk to other musicians in the 70s, they still kind of or who are a little older than me. They don't hold them in the same regard, and
that's why I ask you.
I'm perplexed by that. I mean, I think really what kind of has hurt them, if you could call it hurt them, I don't think they're hurt by it. But in terms of critical regard, is some of the lyrical content. Some of the lyrical content, especially from the Gene side of things, is a little rough to take, especially from a 2023 perspective.
Christine 16,
or nothing to lose. Like, I mean, that's a bit of a tough one to sell.
Yeah.
And before we leave the 70s, I'm so interested on getting your take on this one. If you could pick one album from the 70s from Kiss, which one would you pick? Would you go, some of the albums, the first three? Would you go Destroyer or the Eddie Kramer stuff? Rock and Roll Over, Love Gun, or Dynasty? I don't know.
I have to tell you guys, I just did a session with Eddie Kramer.
Oh my God.
I just did a session. I was playing classical guitar and he was producing.
Oh, wow.
So I really should say an Eddie Kramer album, but you know what? I'm not Eddie. I'm not gonna. And I love rock and roll. I love what you did. I'm grateful for Alive. Eddie made that happen. I think I'm torn between the debut for the songs and Destroyer for being so defining for them, because really what Destroyer did was defined what the spectacle was in this way that was elemental. The four personalities were so clearly defined on that record, but also cohesive in that this is the experience that you heard on Alive in recorded format, because the previous records just didn't capture sonically what it was all about. And the largesse of it. So really, I'm going to go with the first one just because that was the four guys and the original vision. And for Strutter and for Deuce, and for Black Diamond, really those songs are so great. And for the balls to actually go out and do that,
And these guys, they're still playing 5 or 6 songs of that album, right? Even today.
That's it. Those are the undeniable classics. Yeah. But Destroyer, man, it speaks to the band's work ethic. Maybe not Ace so much. Ace was in pinball. Hey, how did I sound today, Curly? I love that. But even that just makes me love the guy more. Anyway, so I'm going to go with the first one. And did you guys know I actually played with John Reagan and Todd Howarth? I was in a band with those guys.
Oh yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, I was in a band called 4 by Fate.
4 by Fate, yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
Oh my God.
I'm the original guitar player in that band.
Oh wow.
Oh wow.
It was me, Stet Howland, John Reagan, and Todd Howarth that were put together by Danny Stanton, because we had all individually appeared on Mitch LaFone's tribute album that he did.
Yeah.
A World with Heroes. That was a benefit album for a hospice in a cancer hospice in Montreal. Anyway, long story short, I was in the first incarnation of that band.
I didn't make those connections. Yeah. Wow.
So I heard lots of great Ace Frehley stories.
I could imagine.
Of course.
A lot.
And Jean, you touched on the 80s era, and you said before that when you were exposed to Animal Eyes and all those albums, they didn't look, kind of at the same level or up to speed with the other bands, all the other 80s bands.
Yeah.
Maybe visually, because they were not, so cute as Rat, or some of the other guys, exactly. But maybe also musically. So how, again, same question. How do you think Kiss fit in the 80s? Do they have a place there, or is just an era that it had to happen, but they didn't make any difference?
I don't know that they made a difference, but you know what? They stayed, they kept their heads above water, and they more than did that. They actually were able to elevate in a few instances. Certainly, like I say, it always comes back to me to the guitar playing. It was Bruce's guitar playing. It always just stood out to me. I was like, here's a guy, he's got the best of the 70s, like the melodic stuff, the bluesiness, but he had all the firepower too. So as a guitar player, I think he was very clever, and he's very underrated. But yeah, like I said, there was always a couple of tunes. When I go back and listen, I think Your Crazy Nights, Your Heaven's
stuff.
On Fire, the Jean Beauvoir stuff. I love. Who Wants to Be Lonely, and Tears Are Falling. I played with Jean Beauvoir. Actually, the show that we played that was recorded for Postcard from Germany, Jean Beauvoir was on the bill that night.
Oh, wow.
We were sharing a dressing room, and I'm just like, all I could thinking of it.
The groove is amazing.
And I love that you could tell it's not Gene playing bass.
Yeah, of course.
And Gene's off making a movie somewhere, and it doesn't matter. But anyway, and John's such a cool guy. Like, he's plasmatics, working with the Ramones. He's so New York, to me, that he's so cosmopolitan. He's all that. The black guy with the blonde mohawk playing with punk music, can play funk, and like, oh, it's so cool. Like, so
complete. Yeah.
So that's rock and roll to me. I thought.
Exactly. That's right. That's right. And what do you think about not only how they fit, but what do you think about the Kiss today, the current lineup? So how do they fit into the music business? Is it just a nostalgia, or what is it? What do you think?
You know what? I think they came out swinging with some good records. Like, I thought Sonic Boom and Monster had some real great moments. I thought Modern Day Delilah was a storming track. I think that you've got like Eric Singer. I mean, he's earned his stripes, certainly creatively, just being part of the Revenge record, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, he's in there, and he's a great guy. He was actually drumming on the Alice tour when I was on that tour. He was the drummer, and I had met him earlier because we borrowed a bass from him when I was doing my record. Because Gilby, doing that record in LA with Gilby, I was like, oh, Duff's not home, but he lives over there. Let's go to Eric's place. Eric who? Eric Singer. Okay. So that was amazing to me. So that was cool. I think Tommy Thayer, he does a great job, man. Like, I went to the show in 2019, End of the Road show here. Yeah. And, I'd heard all the stories. Oh, they're using tapes, it's like, and my merch guy, he knew Doc McGee. So he said, hey man, I got some tickets. So I'm telling you, I walked in just as Detroit Rock City came up. My fists were in the air. I didn't give a shit. I don't. You know what? Paul Stanley's earned the right to have a little help. That guy is saying loud and high for a long time, and his voice. He's pushed his voice. In the '80s, he was hitting notes only dogs could hear.
He gave it all, man.
And you know what? That guy's in his 70s and he's flying above me on a trapeze.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, go ahead, buddy. You can use the tape on Love Gun.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know what? He was singing plenty all night. It was great. So is it nostalgia? I think it goes beyond that. I think it's actually almost like a time capsule of the experience. And it's this idea that Kiss will live on forever. I think that is a band whose iconography will continue on, and the makeup's brilliant, man, because they can stay young. And we're up there watching them. We know how old they are.
That's right. It's the same. Yeah.
For those 2 hours, you're forgetting. Yeah. I have to share my if you don't mind, guys. Go ahead. My meeting Kiss story. Okay, so I've just joined the Nelly Furtado band, and we are in LA. And we are going to play, we're doing the KTLA morning show, and then we're doing the Conan O'Brien, the Tonight Show with Conan O'Brien. So I'm brand new in the band. I'm still the new guy in this new world. Not really, camaraderie in a pop band's not like camaraderie in Helix. Let's put it that way. We ain't telling the same jokes.
Right.
At first. So I'm the new guy. I'm kind of finding my way, feeling a little insecure. And we do the morning show, and it's just Nelly and I and the singers. We're doing just an acoustic thing, right? And it goes well. And as we're leaving the morning show, a limo pulls in, and out comes Kiss in full makeup, full outfits, because they are promoting a new tour. This was 2009. They were going out with somebody.
Yeah, the Live 35.
Yeah.
Like
so they're coming out. And I look, and the whole band, the management, we're all looking, and it's Eric Singer, and he goes, "Hey, Crash Kelly!" He recognizes me because because we had toured together, and he goes, "Hey, man, what are you doing?" I said, "Oh, I was just playing with Nelly Furtado," and he goes, "Oh, come on over."
No.
And he calls me over, and all the guys in Nelly's band and crew and management are like, "You know those guys?" And I'm going, "Yeah, man."
There you go, you got
But I walk over, and Eric goes, "Guys," and they're in a rush, right? They're trying to get in. But Eric stops them and goes, guys, come here. This is a buddy of mine. Let's do a picture with him.
Oh my goodness. Man.
And Gene doesn't want, he just wants to get going. But Paul and Tommy, and they, come on, Gene, come on. I go, okay. But Paul, puts his arm in me, And he goes, so what are you doing here? You know him? I said, I'm playing with Nelly Furtado. He goes, cool. I'm proud of you. Oh, and someone takes a picture and I'm beaming like I'm 12 years old.
Oh my God.
And they're like a mile high in their boots. So after that though, I remember telling the guys in the Nelly band, I'll meet you back at the hotel. I just gotta go. They're thinking I know these guys. Meanwhile, I'm just being a fan, right? But it bought me a little cred that day.
You had to tell the story, man. That's awesome. I love it.
And you know, yeah, to me it was just like I'm in LA and I'm playing the Tonight Show, but I met Kiss. I could have cared less. I could have cared less about the Tonight Show.
Oh man, this is so interesting. You're sort of tying up the loose ends, making connections between, you know, people that we've interviewed on the show, and, you know, Four by Fate. I didn't make that connection. This is really informative, really cool.
Well, you know, it's almost weird. Like you know, especially when I think about the Twisted Sister stuff. Like, you know, did you know I did a musical with Dee Snider?
No.
I got an acting role in his Dee Snider's Rock and Roll Christmas Tale.
Oh, wow.
Really? Oh.
And that happened through Danny Stanton, who was the manager of 4 by Fate.
Wow.
When I left 4 by Fate, like I left 4 by Fate because, to be honest, at the time, I was the only Canadian. They're in the States. I'm still working with Nelly. I just started working with Lee Aaron. I was working with Coney Hatch, going back and forth. And I was just like, I want to do it all, but I can't. Something's got to give. And at the time, I kind of wanted to go in a more traditional 80s direction. They were kind of going in a more almost heavier, grungier direction with 4 by Fate. We just decided, look, guys, this has been great, but we'll part ways as the best of friends. And we did, in a beautiful way. We amicably parted ways. But I really loved working with Danny. And when I saw that Dee was coming to the Winter Garden Theater with his Christmas show, I said, maybe I can play guitar in the band or something. So I phoned up Danny and he goes, let me see if I'll get you an audition. What I didn't realize an audition meant the band you have to be an actor and a dancer.
That's the audition.
Dude. I went and I talk about it all in the book, so I won't give it away too much, but the whole audition process is in the book, and it was the biggest learning curve in my life. I'm working with a Broadway choreographer. I got an acting coach trying to teach me how to act.
What an experience, man.
But it was the best professional experience of my life. And I got to work with Dee, who is to this day a dear friend and a mentor, you know. So incredible.
So Sean, I want to continue the episode, you know, talking about your book. And what we want to do is talk a little bit about the book generally, and then ask you more specific questions about your take on the 80s era. Sure. So my first question is, why write the book now? Do you feel that there was a need to set the record straight, especially now, about 80s music?
Yeah, you know, I initially it came about from my own frustration and as a musician, to be honest with you, and as someone who loves music, to constantly hear this music being derided or being lumped into all of it being lumped into the same category when it's meant so much to me for so much of my life. Not only the music that was made then, but the music that these artists continued to make. So I knew that there was a wealth of diversity in the music, and I really, it was frustrating me when people would just dismiss a band like Mr. Big.
Yeah.
They did that cheesy acoustic song.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the musical pedigree in that band would make your head spin if you knew it, and it meant so much more to me. So I found that every time, if I was in a professional situation, if I said, "Hey, check this out," kind of a Cinderella type vibe, people go, "Cinderella." But if I played the same riff and I said, "Oh, check this out," it's kind of an Aerosmith vibe. Oh, Aerosmith.
Yeah, that's
like
right.
It's the same stuff, but all of a sudden, the thing that inspired me wasn't cool. You know, I wanted to at least do a deep dive on it to show how the music progressed throughout the 80s, but also what was the artistic intention behind it? Because once you humanize things, people tend to have a different view. It's like once you meet somebody, you might have thought you had a political difference, for example, but those things melt away once you make a human connection. And then it's like, oh, well, I don't necessarily love that, but I really like this person, you know?
Yeah.
And it's the same with music, right? And so I thought that if I could humanize this a bit, maybe it might change a few people's minds. But then I also quickly abandoned the idea of changing anybody's mind. At the end of the day, it was really a book about what it meant to me.
Yeah.
And what music means to us as listeners and how it can affect us throughout our lives. So there's a personal narrative that's interwoven inside all of the research and inside all of the interviews.
Okay. That's what I was going to ask, right? That there's a certain structure about the book in how you told the story.
Yeah.
So, right. So it's basically almost like an autobiography, your own life within the 80s scene and all these bands happening around you.
Yeah, because as I changed, the music was changing and I was changing, right? Like all these things are happening and you're seeing things and how it affects you and why it affects you. And it's very interesting. I'm sure we've all experienced this as listeners. You weave in and out of your past, right? You go back to things and you look at them in new perspective, and you might fall in love with something that you loved at one point, or you might be able to go back and say, okay, I love this, but I love this because it happened at this stage of my life, not because necessarily it's inherently great.
Yeah.
I think that that's a natural progression as active listeners, which we all are, right? The three of us we're active music listeners. We don't just listen to music, we take it in and we look at it in cultural setting. We look at it in an anthropological perspective. Like we really do look at this a little deeper than the average listener. Just makes them feel good for a second and they move on to the next thing.
Right. I know that the book is available on Amazon, but is it still available through you? Because the book is signed and it comes with a guitar pick.
Right. Yeah. There's a few left at Rock Paper Merch. We did a few with limited edition guitar pick, and that's from my rockpapermerch.com. And I have a Sean Kelly store there, and you can get those there. Yeah, you can get the signed ones, but you can also get it anywhere you buy books, any major bookstore, independent bookstores, Amazon. I'm with a wonderful company called ECW Press, and ECW has done an incredible job of getting this out around the world. I've received emails from people who read it in Japan, Germany,
wow,
all over the States and Canada. Yeah, so very grateful to be with that great company.
Beautiful,
fantastic.
Jean, we were talking about 80s Kiss before, and let us use the band as a springboard, okay, to touch on a very interesting subject that you mentioned before about this preconception or this kind of a stereotype in the 80s music, as a gimmick, or, trying to downgrade, the quality of what was done at that time. So if we do the parallel with Kiss, so people saw Kiss in the 70s as a gimmick, okay, but when they came into the scene in the 70s, but still, which band do you feel that were nothing more than a gimmick, and which bands were not in the 80s?
Well, it's funny. Like there are some bands where it was definitely like, it was very contrived, like a King Cobra, where it's like, okay, here's the plan. I've got black hair. I want 3 guys with blonde hair. They got to look like this. The song's going to sound like that. But even that was Carmen Apiece, right? But even King Cobra had some great songs. Like, I mean, they had Spencer Proffer produced Thrill of a Lifetime, which I thought was really interesting record. Like, actually had some early hip hop influence in there. Like, so even that, I don't think anybody ever went out of their way to make a shitty record. Like, I don't think anybody ever goes, hey, this is going to be pure crap. I mean, maybe there are some people, but like, I think even, for example, I remember thinking Pretty Boy Floyd at the time was pretty over the top. But I went back and listened to that record. I go, geez, even that's got some pretty catchy tunes, and is pretty spirited, So I think I'm hard pressed to think of a band that was just a gimmick. Like, I mean, I think at some point along the line, your own sense of pride, someone would have a sense of pride or ownership to say, I'm going to try hard to make this the best it can be.
There's already value there. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Village People. I mean, I think that they still wanted to make people happy. You know, like I mean, even them. I mean, that's enough.
That's right.
But I think the argument you're making in the book is that people look at 80s music and see the gimmick, but they don't see the music and how truly amazing 80s music was. And I think people see Kiss the same way. They can't see past the spectacle, and they don't realize how incredible their music is.
Well, I think with Kiss, like I think that I don't know if this is sometimes defensive or if it's completely genuine, but they make no qualms about the fact that they want to be very successful. They want to be financially successful.
Yeah,
they want to sell. And I think there were times that Kiss certainly were reaching and not sure of who they were. And I think the 80s, there was definitely probably some questioning about what is this band? Like, who are we trying to be? Now, fortunately, in Paul Stanley, they had a singer who could sing high, who looked good, who was in shape, who could do the moves, who had the stage presence to compete. You definitely see Gene not quite sure. To me, when I see Gene, he looks kind of like Phyllis Diller.
They didn't fit
a Chicago Bears linebacker.
Right.
And poor, to be fair though, he still stuck with the trademarks. The tongue was still there. Like he was still, in a way, while Paul was pushing into the new frontier, Gene was the one keeping the tradition. And even through being lascivious and lewd, right? Like, I mean, he kept, this is who I am fundamentally. And that did keep a linear sense of that band. So that band, they didn't totally lose what they were. Gene was always the connection to that past. And ultimately, come 96, he is the face of Kiss. There's no doubt about it. It is Gene Simmons, and that is the first thing you see. Now, going back to your earlier question, I think sometimes that ownership of commerciality, where we are definitely trying to get as many people into this, is off-putting to people who maybe look at art as something more insular and more an expression of
more artistic,
more artistic, and that can be offensive. It doesn't mean that there's not art in what Kiss does,
of course,
but it just means that maybe it wasn't. The priority was shared with other consumers.
When you're too vocal on the commercial stuff, maybe you lose credibility, right? Musically speaking.
Maybe that's it.
And it's true, all Kiss fans know that the band jumps from one bandwagon to the next in order to basically become relevant or remain relevant in order to continue to be successful. Now, they did that in the 80s, and they put on, these cringy outfits in the 80s. So, a two-part question here. Again, we're talking about 80s music and the whole, the excess of the 80s and the over the top of the 80s. Do you think, number one, was that necessary for those bands in the 80s? Was it necessary for Kiss to wear these ridiculous, cringy outfits in the 80s?
Well, it's really the zeitgeist of visuality, right? Like, I mean, we've got MTV, much music. All of a sudden, it's as much a visual medium as it is a musical medium. Like, you were listening with our eyes, and I know it affected me. Like, I know I was very cognizant of every time Motley Crue had a look change or a logo change.
It is true.
I was looking for that. And I was looking at things like Rat. Like, I was like, oh, I like the way the logo looks. It's angular. They've got geometric shapes, like that's so 80s, a sphere and a triangle, and their pictures are in there. That stuff resonated with me. The look of the font. I could tell when a record company, even when I couldn't articulate it, I could tell when a record company had spent money on a record, as opposed to, oh, here's the Y&T record. Oh yeah, it doesn't look the same.
Yeah.
They're not as important.
True.
This guys look older. This looks newer, The attempt was necessary. I think the execution in true Kiss style, hey, not only are we going to wear this, I'm going to put more feathers on this. I'm going to look like a peacock.
Yeah, of course.
They probably went so over the top. Like at one point, he looks, I forget if it's like tears are falling. He looks like a pinata. Paul's coming at you.
Yeah.
It's like a mariachi band from hell.
Yeah,
like, what's happening? Is it Big Bird? Am I watching?
Oh my God.
It's so much. And the sex stuff was so ridiculous. I remember watching the home videos and I'm going,
oh yeah,
I don't know much, but I know that guy that can't get 10 girls to lay around with him all day in his apartment. I don't think so. Maybe good, but it was so over the top, like, whereas, and it didn't feel dangerous.
No.
Whereas Motley Crue felt dangerous. I was like, oh, these guys are scaring me.
Yeah.
This, not so much.
Yeah.
But I think they had to compete. And when I look back, actually, not so much on the outfits, but I do love the graphics on Asylum. I actually love the animal print now on Animalize.
Yeah.
When I think about those records, I think, yeah, man, it's kind of cool. Like, I mean, I do like it. So I think they had to try. I just think that they couldn't get out of their own way. They were going to be kissed no matter what. So it was going to be over the top. And some of it's a little rough.
But it's interesting because, when that was so 80s, and now we have the freedom to look back in time and we can compare to what happened after the 80s. But as you were going through the 80s, that was the thing, right? So that was happening. So you either get on the trend, get on the wagon, or you lose, or you're out of business. So you had to. That's it. And also remember, we're not being bombarded with the constant phone and changing images. No,
like really, that
static
image had to grab you in a record store, right? I mean, it's the sea of bright colors and visuals. And I mean, the sheer joy of it was no one knew what the hell they were doing. At these videos, like, why is he swinging on that thing? And what is he on a volcano? Why? Why not? It looked cool.
Exactly.
Something should probably blow up here. Okay, let's blow something up. And it was fun. It was fun.
That's right. That was fun times.
And very, very exciting. Very exciting.
So, Jean, you again, following up on the 80s, Kiss, they came up with some really memorable ballads in the 80s, okay?
Yes.
And so it begs the question, in your opinion, did Kiss need cheesy ballads in order to be heard?
Well, I think that everybody had to, like, there was that attempt to get onto CHR radio, right? The crossover radio, where they were realizing, hey, wait a second. We're going to sell more records, because it wasn't the days of iTunes or Spotify where you just could grab one song if you wanted it. You had to buy that whole record, right? Like chances are, if you couldn't get the 45, right? Yeah. So people were buying whole albums based on, that airplay, right? So I think that was definitely part of the game. It was a smart move. And I thought that Kiss wrote some beautiful ballads, I thought, listen, Forever is an absolutely gorgeous song. And that was actually the song I recorded that along with Terry Illis, who a singer from XYZ. XYZ in the States, I guess.
Yeah.
But XYZ here in Canada, and sang with Great Way. And we did a version of Forever. I love that song. I think it's an absolutely beautiful song. Yeah. What a Reason to Live was a very good song.
Yeah.
What were some of the other ballads? I mean, really.
Well, some heavy ballads, like First in the Night, also, with Jean Beauvoir, that's a great tune too,
Yeah, I guess that would be kind of considered a ballad, right? And
A Million to One.
Million to One.
Yeah.
Love that song.
Yeah. So great. Yeah. I think Paul's such a strong writer. I mean, most of those would have come from Paul, or I think Michael Bolton was involved in Forever, though.
Yeah, exactly. He was. Yeah. I remember you mentioned the word cheesy before, but could you define 80s music as cheesy?
No. I'm not interested in that term. I find it denigrating.
Yeah.
I'm not like, I'm listening from a totally different context now.
Angle,
and even the sounds that some people would say sound dated now. I mean, how dated are they? They keep coming back up in pop music now. Like, I mean,
yes, sir.
think about it. An 808 drum machine is literally the most popular sound in the world. Like, I mean, you listen to Drake or you listen to hip hop, you know, like, I mean, those sounds, those synthetic sounds have definitely found a place in our mainstream culture, you know, to this day. So that, you know, I think if you're coming from the perspective though of a 60s and 70s musician, where you're seeing your livelihood being taken away by machines, which was the start of that with drum machines and, you know, guys like Mutt Lange replacing drummers with
keyboards and stuff.
Keyboards and stuff like that. That could be daunting. And if that's what you value, the organic sound of a drum or a tube amplifier, then I get it. I get why that would sound dated and cheesy. But to me, the only time I would even say approach that word is in some of the lyrical content. That's the stuff that hasn't aged well for me.
I think so too.
It's not about the sex. Like, I mean, I can listen to Motley Crue sing about something gross and sexual and go, yeah, that's still got some street on it. That's snotty. That's scary. That's coming from a different place.
Yeah.
But sometimes some of these guys, it's like, oh, please. Sorry, Paul. Sometimes, like, well, what's that song? Let's put the X in sex. I love the song. But when I hear the lyrics, I'm like, you saw those black lace panties and you knew, it's like, what the hell are you talking about? Nobody's ever had that sexual
or songs like Read My Body, you know, like, it's like, come on.
Oh, come on. Who can forget Put My Log in Your Fireplace, Mr. Gene?
Mr.
Gene with that dulcet ode to equality, burn, bitch, burn. Like,
come on,
come on, baby. Gene, baby.
Okay, so this leads on to the next question, right? So there are a lot of, you know, classic 80s songs that are really reflective of the 80s. Do you feel that there are some songs from Kiss that are easily reflective of the 80s? Or were they just trying too hard?
No, man. I think when they nailed it on the head. Like Heaven's on Fire to me, bang. Boom. They nailed it. Tears Are Falling, nailed it. Who Wants to Be Lonely, nailed it. Thrills in the Night, you know, Lick It Up. Talk about a statement of intent for the 80s. Like, I mean, you got to live like you're on vacation. That is the 80s.
Right. Yeah.
It's the me generation. Yeah. This is what it's about. It ain't a crime to be good to yourself. Like, that's one thing I will say about Paul. Nobody owns leisure like Paul Stanley. He is selling the sizzle. It is fundamentally about the individual's pursuit of a good time and nothing but a good time. And, you know, to Poison's credit, they picked up on that and were able
absolutely
to take that in a really cool, punky, young, energized way. Really, Poison was the best iteration of Kiss in the 80s. Even better than Kiss were.
No, you know what? I'm thinking about that. And you're right. So you're absolutely right. There's something there with Poison. You know, they picked up, you know, where Kiss left off, you know, let's say in the 80s, and they magnified it, you know, and you know, it was so great, man. So
well, it's funny. You know what? Like, let's talk about the 80s. You have Poison and then you have Warrant right underneath, right?
Yeah.
Whereas Poison seemed to retain this raggedness about them. Like, you know, Warrant brought in the session guys. Warrant kind of smoothed the edges. They had Janie Lane's absolutely incredible songs. Absolutely incredible. But the edges were smooth. Beau Hill kind of put his stamp. Whereas with Poison, you come out, you got Rick Brody producing the first record. You got Werman the second. You got Fairburn on. You know what I mean? They're going through different producers, but it's always those ragtag guys, like virtuosos, not by a long shot, but I can hear the personality in the playing. Yeah. You know what I mean? The personality is there, and that makes a great rock and roll band. Whereas on some of the records, there's a bit of a sameness because you're bringing in certain guys to do the background vocals, certain guys to help out on guitar solos, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's the difference between a Poison and a Warrant, and why Poison can still go out there and pack an arena or be part of a stadium tour.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. Absolutely.
Personality.
Absolutely. Yeah. So now let's move into the 90s. So in the you touched on this before, talking about grunge and stuff. So some of the traditional 80s bands, they were kind of tossed aside, for more alternative rock and grunge, and of course, our band, Kiss, they made an attempt to jump on the wagon with Carnival of Souls.
Yeah.
Do you believe they were successful to get in there?
I think they, once again, I think it's just the nature of capitalism, which is kind of a core foundational principle of Kiss. They had to try. We have to be contemporary. And really, it was almost like something they had to go through. Was it successful? I don't love that record. I'll be honest with you.
Okay.
I think there's some really good moments on there, though. I think there's some really musical moments. I love Childhood's End, by the way. I thought that was a really great melodic song. I think Bruce has some really interesting dark tonal moments on there. Some great playing. The record as a whole didn't move me, but I applaud them for taking a swing. You know what I mean? I applaud them for trying. And really, I think it was the last step, whereas if they would have tried to be contemporary one more time, that's it.
They're done.
Because they weren't going to be the Backstreet Boys, I'll tell you that. So that was where it was going next. Point. But smart enough to see the influence they had on all those hit bands at the time. And they said, guys, let's go back to what we were. Let's throw it back on, and it'll be bigger than ever. And every one of those superstar rock bands, alternative rock bands, were acolytes. They were all over the moon about this, and they were all talking about it. So it was brilliant. And then at that point, it's like, once you have a Big Mac, you might throw a few other things on the menu, but you're going to shove Big Mac down people's face the rest of your life. Kiss has a lot of Big Macs now.
they know how to do it. That's right. So again, all those, as you were saying before, those 80s bands, they were trying to find their place and during the grunge era. But then kind of they pushed back, they got back to the roots, and the proof is that they are still around today, as you were saying before. So why do you believe that those 80s bands are still around?
Songs, great songs, good music makes its own friends. And, I'm an elementary school music teacher. So I have the rare privilege of getting to sit with kids who are in grades 7 and 8 and talk to them about what they listen to. And they have the world's music at their fingertips now.
Yeah.
Everything's available, and it's coming at them through TikTok. It's coming at them through video games. It's coming at them through movies. So they are getting snippets of everything. So they could be listening to Drake one moment, they could be listening to trap music, and then they could be listening to AC/DC and Bon Jovi. They like what they like, and they're free of the social ramifications of making the wrong choice. Because it doesn't matter. That music doesn't define socially like it used to for us. Like, at one point, you had to decide, am I going to go and wear the polo shirt and listen to Duran Duran, or am I going to go smoke cigarettes with the Dirtbags and go listen to Motley Crue? I got to figure out what I'm going to do, right? That's my social group. But here, it's really just about songs. And the songs that last are the classics, man. Aerosmith. My 8-year-old son wants to listen to Dream On. That's what he wants to hear. And he listens to that alongside Post Malone and AC/DC and, Take My Horse to the Old Town Road or whatever that they're listening to, right? It's a little bit of everything, but it's just something about those songs has resonated. And I think it does now represent a period of freedom and autonomy that has been lost in our overly technological world, Sometimes I'm sad when I think about the childhood I had that my kids don't have, the freedom and also the vast danger. But I don't miss that. I don't want that for them. But we did, you did have a freedom about it. And that music was the soundtrack of that. And I think it's reflective in the music. I think people get a little taste of what that was like through the music, just like I do with the 70s or the 60s or the 50s, So I think the great songs last, and the bands who had those great songs can go out and deliver them. Def Leppard, that's a band that, but also in every subgenre of rock music, there's a band that transcends, right? And the bands that transcended really were the Def Leppards, the Bon Jovis, and the Motley Crues, right? Like, I mean, they just had enough of those great songs that they could go on.
So let me say something, Pascal. I know that you're dying to say something because I know you already. It's but this, let me tell you, Sean, this is a true genius, man. What you just said, about how you kind of explained what happens with music today and the meaning of songs, and you cross it with technology and how teenagers live today compared to what we used to do. I cannot find a better way to explain what's happening today with music than what you just said. I'm blown away, man. So I need to thank you for that, because you find exactly the right words to express, what many of us feel.
Oh, well, thank you, man. I've thought about it a lot. I've thought about it and been blessed with opportunities. Like, I mean, the kids I'm teaching teach me just as much, like, because the love is still there, and the joy of discovery, like picking up an electric guitar in class and the first power chord, it's the same as when I played it. It's the same. I see the light go off, and it's the feeling, right? So that tradition is the same. And like I said, maybe it's going to be Deep Purple, or maybe it's going to be some Russian alternative band that they found going on the deep web. Like, I don't know, but whatever the spark is that creates the joy, I don't care.
Mm-hmm. John, I got to tell you, I think about Kiss a lot. I talk about Kiss a lot. Claudio and I have interviewed a lot of people, and we've heard a lot of different perspectives on the band, from people we've interviewed, from people we've talked to, from our friends. Yet talking to you, you gave us a new, fresh, and different perspective. And it was so interesting. So
I'm honored.
Before we close the curtain on this episode, I have just one more question for you. I'm curious to know your perspective on this. You talked about, music today compared to the music of the 80s. And it's too bad that era is gone now. Wish we got it back. Is it possible to know, where do you think music is going? What are the trends in music now, you think?
I think whereas there were more people diving into less selection, you now have less people who have way more selection. But those people, that smaller group, have the ability to deep dive so much they become even more diehard fans than we were. There are, like, for example, I live in Toronto, and there's a 1,500 seat venue called the Danforth Music Hall. I will go, I live on that street or close to that street. I'll walk by there, and there's 2 tour buses outside and some band I've never heard, and a lineup around the block. Now, that band might not ever play the arenas like some of the bands we grew up on, but they are playing those 1,500 seaters in every town, and they're out on the road, and they're doing it. So it's existing in smaller tales. So I think that is where it's going. We'll be able, and we have the delivery, like this computer that I'm talking to you on. In 20 minutes, I'm going to take it downstairs and plug into my rig, and I'm going to make a Lee Aaron record.
Wow. Yeah.
Like, this is what we're doing, right? Wow. And then tomorrow I'm going to take it and I'm going to project the music theory lesson. Like, I mean, the tools of communication and dissemination of art and information are so amazing. We can reach out and instantly get feedback and find out who's listening and what they really want. And we can tailor make things for them. Like and that fosters a diehard connection that will continuously support artists. So that's what I encourage young artists to do. It's like, find your people, not all the people, because not all the people care, but the ones who really care will stay with you because you have the ability to connect with them. And really, I'm not lying when I say I kind of know everybody who will buy something I make. Like, it's like, because I know them, because we interact. Like, I mean, they support me and I'm grateful, but I get just as much as I give. You know what I mean? Like, I kind of, it's really has become what I've always wanted it to be, was friendship and fellowship. Like, that's really why I got into music. I just wanted to feel the friendship that I thought existed within these bands, like, I mean, like the camaraderie. And then you find out later on that everyone hated each other. But at the time, I thought everybody was brothers. And you know what? I did find too, through playing with my brothers in Coney Hatch and my Lee Aaron family and Nelly and Gilby and all these wonderful people that I played with, it can happen. You actually can become family with your bandmate. So that's been the best part of the whole journey.
Oh, nice.
Beautiful, man. Well, it's John, let me say it's too bad we have to wrap it up, but let me just give you some closing remarks here. So to me, having the chance to be here with you and Pask and share this episode with our audience, it's truly a blessing, and I can't thank you enough. To me, having someone here with us like you, being an artist, a musician, someone who fought, from the early days, being a teacher now, writing a book, you have the full package, my friend. I'm telling you, and you're so humble, so kind. You're a true rock star, but I feel like you're one of us. So I can't thank you enough for this time, and truly a blessing. Thank you so much.
Thanks, man. Well, listen, I feel the same. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm so grateful for the chance to share a little bit of what I've done with you guys and with your audience. And if anybody wants to hang out, I'm always at Sean Kelly Guitar on Instagram or Facebook, and I love just talking music. My wife doesn't want to talk about it anymore. So like, if anybody wants to talk, my kids don't want to know about it.
You need us, right?
I need you guys. I got to get out of my head.
No, but it's really clear that you put so much thought into everything that you do, and you appreciate all of the greatness that has come your way. And like you said, it's because of how much you've given, and you're getting so much back from your music, from the fans, and again, I remember seeing you on stage, man, and you really stuck out to me because there was something about you, your personality radiated into the audience. I felt like I feel like I know that guy, and it's like, okay, I gotta have this guy on the show, man. It's gonna be so interesting. And I wasn't wrong. You are a passionate, enthusiastic, intelligent rock star with so much wisdom behind you. And I'm being serious. And I really hope our listeners listen to this episode from beginning to end twice, because there's so much to learn from this. So much to learn from you, man. Thank you so much.
Well, conversely, I'm going to share this with everybody because I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you guys. And what did Kim Mitchell say? Close companions in the concert bowl. We open our hearts. We live the song.
Oh, wow.
That's
nice.
It's
beautiful.
True. Nicely said.
Beautiful. Thanks again.
Awesome. Great chatting with you boys. And send me the link.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, man. Take care, guys.
Take care. To the KISS Army, we hope you enjoyed this episode. I know we did. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas, please send them to talktome@kissarmynationpodcast.com. Until the next time, remember, never stop rocking. Take care, everyone. If you enjoyed this episode, like and subscribe on YouTube, or follow us on Spotify, Automatic, iHeartRadio, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to make yourself heard. Leave us a comment on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. See you all soon, KISS Army.